computer. Okay,
Okay.
and anything we put in the chat, if you wanted everybody to see it, remember that
Sure.
Zoom doesn't, when people, as people sign in, it doesn't, they only see what was on when they were there.
Okay, great. Okay, well, is it 5 after? Yeah, it is. So why don't we record and get started?
It's recorded.
It's recorded, okay. So I will start with introductions. I know everyone pretty much knows me very well. I'm Rose Quinn, and this is our second in-person SafeCast meeting. We've been doing SafeCast meetings for a while on Zoom. So I will pass it over to Claudia. Claudia, would you like to speak?
Sure, I'll say something. I just got back from the DC area visiting my daughter, and one thing that was really startling to me, I didn't have a bike, I was a pedestrian and public transit rider, was the way cars deferred to me. I get to an intersection, and yes, there would be, a button you press. But the minute I was in the intersection, or if I was on a sidewalk and there was a driveway where a car was going to exit onto the main road, they were watching and waiting for me. It was just such a startlingly stark experience after living in Kingston for 8 years and feeling like every time I leave the sidewalk or I enter the roadway, I can't expect that anybody's going to pay attention to me. And I'm just noting that because, the DC area is famous for its beltway and its traffic and everybody's zooming around in cars. But I felt like the minute I appeared, people recognized there was a pedestrian and accommodated me. And that's what I have to say, what I'm looking for as a person who doesn't want to be in a car unless that's the only way to get someplace. And I do own a car and I drive, and I'm grateful that I can, but I prefer to walk or ride my bike whenever possible. And if there's public transit, yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I have to say this evening. I could say a lot more, but that's where I'm just
Yeah.
getting back from that trip, so.
Great. Yeah, thanks so much, Claudia. So, and we'll talk about in a few minutes, possibly why that cultural difference is a little bit so stark between the
I know, it's
places.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I will throw out my hypothesis about that.
So let's put that on the agenda, let's put a brief discussion about that, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Matthew, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Matthew Mackey. I am a constituent services liaison for Senator Michelle Hinchey, who represents portions of Ulster, Dutchess, Greene, and Columbia counties. I attended the last emergency meeting. I'm happy to be here again. And to listen to all of the issues and hopefully pass those issues to the senator to create some solutions.
Thank you so much, Matthew. Thank you. Okay, so Tanya.
Tanya Garman, I live in the city of Kingston, hello.
She does it all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tanya did a lot of work with Kingston zoning in particular, and is really kind of our watchdog with all of that stuff.
In regards to zoning and safe streets, it's a form-based code. It's more about shaping the public realm. The city of Kingston has the new form-based code adopted and has just started looking at any possible amendments that the staff or tinkers that the staff wants. So I've been put on that board at the city level. But yeah, that form-based code has brought us some street safety aspects and hope in street design standards, and also the focus on shaping the public realm, towards walkability, bikeability.
Great. Okay. So I thought that we would start first of all, because there's So as Claudia just, I think this is a good segue because of what Claudia was just talking about. Why is there this possibly this cultural difference right now in places like
Yeah.
DC and in New Jersey and Massachusetts? It's really quite stark. And I sent you that email. Could you pull up that? Yeah, so what I believe, and what really, I don't think this is like a lot of speculation. You know, the bipartisan infrastructure law, which was signed into law in 2022, wholeheartedly and completely adopted what's called the safe system approach. And the safe system approach is really nothing less than a complete paradigm shift, really, in the way planners and engineers and even enforcement and traffic safety educators were being tasked now to go forward and try to design safer streets, and not just safer, but also more equitable. Because one of the things the bipartisan infrastructure law has built into it in the transportation area is it's not just safety, which is of course extremely important, but it's also this idea that culturally and, you know, through our society and through our planning and poor planning, I could say, we have marginalized and really disenfranchised a lot of our what are called most vulnerable road users. And when we talk about vulnerable road users, I think immediately we think about people on bicycles and people who are walking. And those are, of course, vulnerable road users also. But the other thing that makes one a vulnerable road user is, you know, race and social economic status, because we know that statistically, if you're, you know, a person of color or you're a person of, you know, less means, then you're substantially greater risk for harm on our roadways. Particularly if you're a person who's walking or on a bike, but even if you're in a car, if you're a person of color, you're at greater risk. Often, I mean, you know, sadly, you know, just by virtue of the ways that we traditionally try to go about fixing our traffic safety issue, which is law enforcement, which is a part of the puzzle, we have to understand though that like we can't lean completely on law enforcement because, you know, law enforcement actually, you know, has been demonstrated to put people in harm's way, particularly people of color. So people who are getting pulled over disproportionately, that causes undue harm, and potentially causes physical harm, as in the case of Monica Goods right here in Ulster County. So when we talk about vulnerable road users, we, you know, we're talking about this like pretty big group of people, but you know, basically they're the people who are those who are most at risk and those who are most disadvantaged within our transportation system. So were you able to pull that up?
It's not, hi,
Okay,
here
and we have
comes
one more person.
Ezra, and it doesn't.
All right, well, I
I
can.
put the link in the chat, but it's no, Ezra, hi, nice to see you. I'm trying to get my computer to allow Zoom to share my screen. I don't know if I was successful, but I put what we're looking at in the chat so far. I'm
Okay.
gonna attempt it again and then.
Okay, so what is the safe system approach? So I'm just gonna like, just so I don't miss any points, I'm just gonna pull it up right here.
Do you know, can you help me with this? Do you know? I'm trying to share my screen. And it says open system preferences. I didn't do that last time I used it. So share screen. I wonder you're younger than me, I think.
So can I, I'm just gonna go.
You go ahead, yes.
Okay, so the safe system approach says primarily that human beings make mistakes. Human beings, by virtue of being human beings, are, you know, when we're driving, we will potentially, cause harm because we're in vehicles. And because we are, in vehicles, if we're driving, we can potentially really harm, get it? I really have to apologize for this.
Oh, yeah, I'll tell you when I'm ready. I'm ready to pull it
Were you able to pull up the PowerPoint?
up. You wanna,
What with what I sent you in the email?
I just need to share it. I was gonna share. my
Oh,
screen.
okay, great. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Do you want
trying
me
to
to let you do that?
Okay. Yeah, are you gonna give an overview? Do you want?
Why don't we have Ezra introduce themselves while Tom is pulling that up? That sounds great.
Oh yeah, who are we on with? This is
Oh, yeah.
Dave right?
Yes,
Okay, hi, they can just hear me and see me.
yes.
Hi, everybody, I'm Ezra. I live here in Kingston, I live over by the Y. My fiance and I, we both, are cyclists in Kingston. We don't have cars, so, we rely on that to, even to get to Ulster and stuff. I work in Ulster and, yeah, here with you guys, working on stuff. Big focus.
Okay.
Great.
And actually, the other thing that we can talk about while Tanya's trying to pull that up, because it's just a little confusing trying to describe
And
that.
I've got the.
You know, if you want to send it to me, I can share my screen. I can post
I think
it.
I figured it out.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
Thank you. I'm just gonna pull it up.
Because we could also talk about your rest.
So the,
Oh, yeah.
You get it? So it's
Yeah.
the first one?
the first one, Daley Freeman,
No.
FW, by first.
This one, Vision Zero, right there.
Okay, thanks.
There we go. Awesome.
Okay,
All right, and you guys share the screen?
yeah. That's. And it didn't,
We won't do it. All right, I'm just gonna read along.
Okay,
So now
great.
it's up.
okay.
Okay. So, and I'm gonna send everybody the link to this so that you have it. Okay. So I have to change it. Okay, so. So the safe system approach basically has several key principles. And the first one is that, as I was just saying, people make mistakes. So our transportation system should be designed and operated to accommodate the inevitable fact that people do make mistakes. So we have to, it's not enough, for example, to just say that, this is part of why we get away from using the language like this was an accident, right? Because yes, people make mistakes, but because people make mistakes doesn't mean that we should just accept people are going to die for those mistakes. So the next part of the safe system approach says that people are vulnerable and human beings have limits for tolerating crash force, and we should design and operate our transportation system to recognize and accommodate those vulnerabilities. And again, it's not enough to just say that driving is just inherently dangerous. Thank you very much. It's what we have to say is, okay, driving is inherently dangerous. So what do we then have to do to make it less dangerous, right? It's not okay just to kind of have this kind of grim response and say, well, it's just the way it is. Driving is, people are going to die. In other countries, in Europe and in Canada, they're doing remarkable things by incorporating Vision Zero, which basically says that you should just never accept that people are going to die. Does it mean that nobody's ever going to die on the roads? Of course not. Unfortunately, there is risk in everything that we do, but there doesn't have to be the amount of risk that we have on our roads right now. And another key principle is that safety is proactive. So in other words, you have to you have to understand that you have to look ahead into the future and see what beautiful. Thank you, Claudia. Oh, Claudia. Okay, can you I love you, Claudia. Okay. All right. Okay, so let's go down a little bit more. Claudia, can you do it?
Scroll to
Alright.
the blue screen, the blue portion.
Yeah, all right. So let's go into where it says So we went through that, the blue one enough, so let's go to where it says traditional versus the safe system approach. So go down a little bit for me, Claudia, so I can see the whole thing. Perfect, okay. So a comparison would be a traditional approach says, well, we should be preventing crashes, and the safe system approach says that we need to prevent death and serious injury. So, well, what's the difference? Well, the difference might actually be something like, you can go ahead and put up a barrier in a road, for example, that a car moving at a slow rate of speed might get some damage on, right? And that's like kind of the whole idea behind planters and putting up like cement barriers. But that is more acceptable than a human being ever coming into contact with a vehicle, because of course a human being coming into contact with a vehicle, those damages are going to be much more substantial and of a different type. So the traditional approach says that we need to improve human behavior. And this is the one where I really, even today at the press conference, when they were talking about, the person who killed Ray Rauwray and the great work that the police did doing investigation, I was a little disappointed to hear us once again kind of go back to it, but we have to really like educate our pedestrians, right? Mm-hmm. This one just really always gets us. And why? Because it brings us, and I am a traffic safety educator, okay? So I'm not gonna ever tell anyone that you shouldn't be wearing bright colors and you shouldn't have bikes on your, lights on your bike, all absolutely true. But the bottom line is what saves people's lives is designing safer roads. That's how Europe did it. That's how Hoboken is doing it. That is how Canada did it. And it is not handing out safety vests. I'm sorry. And it is not more and more education to the most vulnerable people. The education, if we are going to use an educational approach, it should be more targeted to the drivers. But even still, the better approach is to design speedways that keep people, or roadways that keep people safe. So the next thing, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more too, controlling speed. Controlling speed is like, that's a great thing to do. We're trying to reduce the speed limit right now, but the safe system approach actually says that we also need to reduce the kinetic energy. And that is something that we really can't, when we're talking about roadways, that's a little bit less of an issue. This is more towards our, designing our vehicles. But when we're talking about kinetic energy, again, we go back to this idea that if a human body is, put into harm's way with a vehicle, that human body is not going to withstand that very well. So we have to take very proactive measures to, reduce the potential for harm. So there's lots of different ways that we can do that. So the next element would be individuals are responsible. Well, yes, individuals are responsible for their behavior, and they have to be proactive about their own safety. No argument there. But what the safe system approach actually says that we all share this responsibility. So it is not just even the driver. So like a lot of us will say like, oh, you've got to hold the drivers accountable. And of course, to some extent you do, but really what we need to do more and more, because this is the scientific data-driven way to save lives, is we need to redesign our roadways. And so that is actually bringing in the engineers and the policymakers also. So not just the driver or the pedestrian or the bike rider. And the traditional approach says that we react on past crash history. And this is one that we really strongly need to get away from. It is very proactive. So the safe system approach says that we actually have to be looking at all of our intersections and looking at all of our areas of potential harm and every new roadway that we design. And we have to be like kind of anticipating where those areas of risk might be. So why don't you go up a little bit more, Claudia, and I think we'll talk a little bit about this and then we'll kind of, you know, this is a lot to take in and but it's really key and critical to understanding how these shifts are occurring right now.
I want to just interject and
Yeah.
just point out that Jen Metzger, I put what she said at that press conference, and she talks about the 3 E's. So that's kind of connection to that press conference.
Yeah, so yeah, the E's are all over the place, I have to say. I want to add one more E to these E's, and that E is like enraged. So when we talk about the E's of traffic safety, I was a traffic safety educator for many years, and you know, we always said that, you know, you looked at engineering and education and enforcement and emergency services. And we don't stop looking at those. I mean, those are still all important, but we also have to add in, as I mentioned before, equity and engagement, which is, I think, probably one of the areas that we're just the most like. We're just not following up on what our own communities are reporting to us, the dangerous situations. And I think that is an area that we need a lot of help with. And then the last part of this that we don't do very well either is evaluation. And I would say that this is really, really critical. You know, once we put the infrastructure down or we make the rule, we have to go back and see if it's really working. And then make adjustments based on that. I think of the bike lane that's right across the street here, which was certainly like, you know, an ambitious project and a worthy project, but it's an evolving project that we have to go back and take a look at and say, all right, well, we didn't get this 100% right. So there are still situations where people are in harm's way, so we have to fix it. And the ultimate goal is safe travel for all. And so the safe system approach, you know, not only is it really just important for the most vulnerable road users, but you know, the safe system approach also applies to, you know, our people in cars also, because using this new methodology also keeps drivers and people in their cars safer, right? Reduce speeds, keep everybody safer, unless you're, you know, on a road like the Autobahn or even the Thruway that's designed for speed. You know, it's just a smarter idea to be going slower. So any questions on any, because it's a lot. So does anyone have any questions on any of this stuff?
No, I just want to like jump up and down and say, yes, 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 yes.
So to go back to your point, Claudia, so why is it that in DC and in
Actually, I should
Massachusetts?
clarify. I was in Bethesda, Maryland when I was walking around.
Okay, well, but even in Maryland, right, well, Maryland and any of these, you know, places that are adopting safe system,
Yep.
you see it. You see it like you see that probably first, the big thing that I see when I go to Massachusetts is their speeds. You know, some streets are down to 20 miles an hour in Massachusetts. You know, and that is like really like just paramount to really a lot of safety issues is, as I just said, you know, the slower you go, the less potential harm. So, so what, like in Maryland and in Houston, if you can believe that, Texas, and you know, a lot of other places that are getting what the Safe Streets for All grants, when are really buying into the safe system approach wholeheartedly, you're seeing these very tangible shifts in the way that we do this. So do you want to go down a little bit more, Claudia? Okay. So what does the future look like with Safe System? So physically separate the people who are walking and biking from drivers wherever possible. If not possible, lower the speeds to protect people outside of their cars. And use traffic calming strategies and be proactive. So again, when you're in an area where it is very clear that they have bought into and adopted the Safe Streets approach, you notice it. You notice it right away. You see that, Claudia, as you said, that the culture starts to shift a little bit and people aren't quite as cranky about slowing down for people and pedestrians, for people in crosswalks rather. And, you know, it's just, once people get used to it, they really seem to like it. And how do we do things like maintain safe speeds? I mean, so kind of like what we went through before. I mean, we just have to make sure that we are keeping our cars slow where we can't physically separate people. So where we can't have a really great sidewalk or where we can't have a bike lane. We need to make, and we're in an area where there's lots of people who are using the infrastructure. You know, this isn't like going to be applied, this wouldn't be applied to rural roads where everyone's doing like 55 miles an hour. But that's basically, you know, the idea is like, if people are around cars, then the cars have to be going slower. Is that always going to be really popular with every single car driver? Absolutely not. Will they get used to it? Hopefully. As I said, you know, when you go to these communities where they have clearly bought into Safe System, people seem pretty cool with it, you know. So we have a new person that's sitting in. So would you like to introduce yourself to the?
Oh, there are people.
Yeah, there are other people here. Yes, that's why I'm looking this way. Sorry.
Claudia, do you want to take it off of shared screen and then put it back on?
Okay.
Hi, I'm Sarah Pasty. I'm the alderwoman from Ward 1, and I used to be on the Public Safety Committee last year, but now I'm not on that committee, but I'm still interested in public safety and safe streets, and there are issues in my own ward that relate to safe streets. So this is it's a topic I'm really interested in.
Great.
Very much for everyone. What is that happening?
By Forsyth Park.
Oh, okay.
So we have,
Oh, you still live there.
pardon?
You still live there.
We have the problem of Lucas Avenue.
Yes.
And all of the side streets and the little neighborhoods that were built in a sort of suburban car-driven neighborhoods, not for walking. And so the walking and car relationship is.
Yeah, I still live on Merit, so.
Oh, yeah, sure. Oh, I know.
So,
Yeah, you know,
Yeah, not.
it's not fun, no, but
Yeah,
we're working on it
yeah.
over there.
And on the Zoom, we've got Claudia Forrest, who's a member of Bike Friendly Kingston and Safe Pass Ulster, and we've got Matthew McKay, who's from Senator Hinchy's office.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
And I was just wrapping up with a quick discussion about the Safe System approach. And why, you know, so Claudia brought up a very interesting point that she was in Maryland and it seemed like people were just driving slower and a little bit nicer.
I think it depends where you are in Maryland. My sister lives in Maryland, and in her area, they do not drive faster and nicer.
Yeah.
Rose,
So I guess
want
it would depend.
can I just clarify? I don't think they were driving slower and nicer. I think they were following the law. And the law is, you know, when the sign comes on for the pedestrian to cross, everybody stops. You know, when you're on the sidewalk and you're starting to approach an area like a curb cut where a car could be exiting a parking lot, they wait for the pedestrian. It's like they understand the pedestrian has rights. and again, you're talking about a system where this is built in, so I'm assuming they have both laws and also a culture of understanding. The majority of people are driving and they are concerned about driving, but yet I, as a single pedestrian in that environment, was not afraid of getting run over. I knew when I got into the street, no one was coming at me with a car. And I don't have that experience in Kingston. And I actually posted a week ago a video, which I started to take when I was on Greenkill Avenue in the bike lane. And I came down the hill and I was going up the hill to the Five Corners. We all know where that is, right? On Greenkill Avenue, there's the green line. And I was going up the hill and there was a semi parked perpendicular to the bike lane, trying to back into a driveway. And I was forced to stop because I couldn't go behind it because it was going to back up into me. I couldn't go around it because there's 2 lanes of traffic. And I stopped and I waited and I thought, this is just, and the semi just stood there. I thought, this is what we're doing now. We're saying as pedestrians and cyclists, let's video what's going on in the bike lane and report it. So I start taking a video. I can't go anywhere. I take out my phone. And this pedestrian out of nowhere is crossing in the middle of the road, jaywalking, right through all the traffic, and starts yelling at me to stop videoing and says I shouldn't be there and I shouldn't do that. And of course, I was coming back from a medical appointment. So I'm riding my bike to and from medical care. I'm going home to get on Zoom to do my job. So I'm not, it's not recreational, even though I enjoy riding my bike, it's for purposes. And he yells at
He
me.
has out that he said that he's trying to work to
Yeah,
about
that's what I was getting to. He yells at me, he says, he's working. And that's when I lost my temper. I got sarcastic and I said, do you think I'm filing my nails here? Like, do you look at me and you see me, I'm a woman, I'm frivolous, I'm on a bicycle. Like, what is your concept of what I'm doing here in the roadway where the state gives me the right and it's designated, there's biking insignias all up and down the lanes. And by that time, I don't think he could hear me because he was crossing far enough away and the engine of the truck was loud enough. I mean, I was so disheartened. I'll say, I could say a lot of other words, but I stopped videoing when he started yelling at me because I was verbally assaulted and I just kind of wanted to defend myself, but I wish I had gotten that on video. I wish I'd turned my camera right on him and caught him yelling at me, obeying the law, while he's busy breaking the law and being verbally abusive towards me. And, I stopped at the stop sign at the bottom of the hill. I wait for the traffic, I'm obeying all the laws and I'm getting verbally assaulted. It just, to me, was the most ironic part of the whole conundrum that we're dealing with.
Yeah, reflection of the local culture.
Yeah.
And also blatant sexism too, I'll just put it like, I'm a woman, I don't work, I'm on a bicycle, I'm joyriding, I'll stop.
Oh, yeah, all that, Claudia. Yeah, it's, so did anyone, so I think we were gonna move on from well, I guess actually I should wrap it up by saying, why is, safe system so important? Not just because, obviously it's hopefully gonna save lives and has been saving lives. I mean, so Hoboken, New Jersey adopted Vision Zero and Safe System years ago. They adopted this 10 years ago. And then it took them 3 years to get to 0 fatalities, and they've stayed there for 7 years.
Wow.
I mean, it's the proof is definitely in the pudding. And a lot of people will kind of throw in, well, what about New York City? The death rate is still pretty, horrific down there, which is of course very true. And I think that one, you really can't compare New York City to anything else in the world, barely, no matter what. And also, and I think we're possibly dealing with this here too, like with this new infrastructure that we're putting up, which is great, we're encouraging more and more people to be out walking and biking, but we've still got these huge gaps in service where people aren't being, aren't safe. Right, so we don't, like, Kingston is a perfect, there's people who aren't from Kingston here, so I don't wanna just harp on Kingston, but Kingston is a great example for that with our sidewalks. Right, so, protected bike lanes are wonderful, but really, we need a lot of sidewalks in Kingston, right? And so I think that, another thing that Safe System might also ask us to really do is to hone in on who's really the most vulnerable and who really needs the most protection. And, when you walk through, for example, Midtown Kingston, and the sidewalks are the condition that they're in, and you see people in mobility devices rolling down the middle of the street and people with baby strollers, because the sidewalk is in such poor condition, you can understand why people say, well, you're putting up a bike lane, but you're not doing anything to keep us safe, right? And we certainly don't want those kinds of fights to break out, because we're all on the same side, really. Like, we want to protect the people who are also in their mobility devices. So, so the other reason why, though, it's really important to move in this direction is, grant money. Like, the more we move towards this, the more the federal government rewards us, okay? So if you, just do a quick search and an alignment of, the Safe Streets for All grants and some of the other really big grants that are out there, and they all kind of say, like, are you reducing your speeds? Do you have a safety plan? Do you, these are the things that they want to see already in place. I'm not a betting person, but I might take the bet that part of the reason why Kingston did not get the grant this time around, they have a good chance the next time, but they did not do things like they weren't really demonstrating where there was these areas of true vulnerability, that's where they were honing in, right? So it's really important. It's really important if we want to have these opportunities moving forward, if we want to, access more of this money, the more that you do, and by the way, like reducing a speed limit and doing daylighting and doing things like that, it's a heck of a lot cheaper than building, huge bike lane networks, which would be great someday, but they make you just as competitive for these grants. So that's another reason why, Safe System is really important. The federal government says it is extremely important, and they want to see it in our grant applications. So any more questions about that? Because I could move on from that. I can send everybody lots of websites and information. There are so many amazing webinars out right now that are free from the federal government on this. Unfortunately, our DOT has not been doing a good job at all conveying this information to us. And, in the engagement education part, that is part of their job. So I would say that DOT really should be doing a better job letting us know, like, that we're not even, that people don't even use Safe System as a regular part of their vernacular when they're talking about making these changes. I think speaks to a big part of the problem. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about, just pull up where Governor Hochul signed 25 miles an hour.
Claudia, do you see that in the links that I just posted? It's the third to the bottom. Can you share the screen for that one? I put it in the chat if anybody wants to have the link too.
Okay, well, we don't really have to have it up. I can just, I kind of, here we go. So a lot of times people will say, well, why can't we in New York, upstate New York, reduce our speed to 25 miles an hour, just like they did in New York City and like they do in Massachusetts? And well, the bottom line is we should be able to, because in 2022, the governor did actually sign legislation saying that she wanted municipalities to be able to do just that, to reduce their speeds. Unfortunately, New York State DOT kind of jumped in onto that one and at the last minute added a lot of really restrictive language and confusing language for that matter, that made it virtually impossible for municipalities to, I'd say it's not impossible because a couple of them did do it, but municipalities aren't known for being particularly brave. And the ones who did it had to kind of step out on a limb and say, like, we're just gonna do this and, DOT just stop us. And DOT has not, because I suspect that DOT knows that they really can't stop you. So the language that was added in at the last minute, which was not part of the New York City language, was that basically two very serious things. One, that there was going to still need to be speed studies done. And then the other was that if you were not in an incorporated village or a city, that your town had to be 55, the population had to be over 55,000 in order for you to do that.
That's so hard.
Which is no towns.
Yeah,
basically,
exactly.
In upstate New York. Like,
Yeah.
it's maybe lower Westchester, but there's like no town.
Dixie is only like 50,000.
Well, it's a city.
Yeah.
That's a city. So a city is different. A city is like, they have their own rules, but yeah. So when you look at, do a comparison and you look at Massachusetts, when they're enacting their 25-mile-an-hour, you see boom, 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 like township after township, 25, 25, 25. You look at New York and you see New York City and you see Bedford, you see some parts of Beacon,
Right.
but no one is implementing it, of course, kind of giving more credence to this like crazy idea that nobody cares, right? And I always say, like, it's not that nobody cares, you're not asking the right question. The question is, do you want to be able to reduce the speed in your own town or village or city? Do you want to have that authority? And of course, everybody is going to say, yes, yeah, of course we want that. Instead, the question usually gets phrased like, do you want restrictions on your speed and driving and, all of these kind of gloom and doom? But really, that's the question. And so we really, we've been working our butts off trying to get around this language problem. We do have a couple of municipalities that are hopefully going to go forward. We do have, I don't want to say exactly who they are just yet because I don't want to out them necessarily, but we do have one town at least that's going to try this kind of road segment thing. Another thing that has happened and I think is really important for the speed reduction issue is that New York State DOT based a lot of their decisions on what's called the MUCTD, right? I'm saying that right? But that is MUCTD, yeah. That is the manual for traffic safety devices that DOT says that they have to default to, even though it's really just a guideline, but they absolutely have to default to it. Well, they just reissued the MUCTD in the end of 2023. And guess what it says? That if you have if your road is in an area where people are walking and biking, the context overrides everything else. So in other words, you don't need a speed study. You don't need a speed study. And I have people from NOCDA and I have people from NYC DOT, or at least they were former employees, who were really very adamant on this fact, right? You do not need, especially if you're in a town, if you're in a village, you do not need the speed study. This is like, this is really a big sticking point. And what we really need right now is to have more cities and villages step up and challenge and just say, listen, we're doing it every speed up. The people in the towns are still at a big disadvantage because they have to go through the DOT speed study for right now. What on the advocacy side of that, so that's kind of like the technical get around side of it. The advocacy side of it is that we still need to go after this law in a big way. and get this language changed so it reads the same as it did in New York City, which is basically, if you want 25 miles an hour, you can do it. You can do it. If the context of the road, that's the only thing you have to demonstrate to DOT. People are walking here. That's all you have to demonstrate. If people are walking there and you want the speed to be 25 miles an hour, then you can do it. Remember that, like, you know, not every single road is actually immediately going to be 25 miles an hour, because not every single person in a village or a town wants every single road to be 25 miles an hour. This is something that it's really giving a lot of sovereignty back to the cities and back to the towns to make those decisions for themselves. And again, that's a really, you know, going back to safe system, that engagement piece, that getting, you know, understanding that the communities do understand what they need to keep themselves safe and the people within their community safe, giving them the right to do that. So that push is really continuing. I've been really trying to have I've had some great conversations with Kingston Common Council. I've had some great conversations with people in New Paltz. I've had some great conversations with lots of other people in Ulster. You know, the confusion is vast. And, you know, no one wants to really be the first. I think that's always a tricky thing. You know, we don't want to be the first to have DOT running after us and saying, no, you have to take all the signs down. One thing that I was really assured of by the person from NACA, which makes perfect sense. I was like, well, what about lawsuits? Because that's something that cities and villages kind of always go back to. And he was like, it makes absolutely no sense that someone would sue because you dropped a speed limit. It does not put anybody in further harm's way. It makes, he's like, in a court of law, I don't know what you could possibly do to say that making the speed 25 miles an hour is harming. Or that more importantly, that my immediate harm, because that's what a lawsuit usually is, right? Like, I was immediately harmed by this. You dropped the speed 5 miles an hour and I was immediately harmed by it. I don't see it either. You know, raising the speed limit, yes, you know, like you raised it to 40 and now, you know, whatever, yeah. But lowering it to 25, no. So we're really gonna start trying to go forward with supporting municipalities that try to go ahead and do this. And is there any questions so far about, because there was a lot of information and a lot of changes and stuff. Any questions about the speed limit?
You want
Does anyone, go ahead.
you want me to go back to the PowerPoint, or you want me to keep it on as
No,
well?
you can, it's all right, you can leave it, don't worry about it. I just wanted to, that was just my proof to everybody that the governor did sign that law. Like, so this is not, it's not like, we don't have to fight to get that law. What we have to fight to do is get the language of that law changed. Could we even just get DOT to remove their language? I mean, you know, that was one strategy, you know, with the Safe Streets Coalition that we were trying to do. I still don't necessarily think it's a bad one, to just really press the governor to press DOT to say, you know, stop it. Just take that language you put in at the last minute out, you know. And I don't know, I would think that at this point, with the situation that we have in Ulster, I find it hard to believe that DOT is going to fight us on much. But then again, you know, this is my new favorite saying, self-fulfilling bureaucracy, right? Just never wants to change. It wants to do the same thing it's always done. And that's probably the biggest issue that we're up against.
Can I ask a question about the city of Kingston?
Sure.
Are we allowed to talk about our elected officials here?
I can exit if you want.
Well, we have a Kingston elected official here, Claudia,
No,
just so
I
you know.
I know we do, but I mean specifically the mayor. Are we allowed to talk about his
You
position?
can say whatever you want.
This is a great
One-
place.
one- One thing I know is I wrote a letter, an email to the mayor, and I never heard back. and Tanya helped me, write the letter with the correct language. This was about the parking situation at the 5 corners of the new business. And they wanted 13 spots and they had 5, and then, they were going to the city to request. So I write a letter stating my position and opposing the 13 spots and requesting that they honor the original 5. And I never heard from the mayor. And I know I got the address correct because the first one bounced back and the second one didn't. So that just leads me to question, how interested and responsive is our mayor to our concerns and needs of
Oh,
our,
I'm tempted to share the letter I got back from him.
please.
It was a doozy. He put a picture of my house in the letter and said, "Oh, Tanya, are you just against the a dispensary being there, like so many people?" And in a very measured response, sent it to, and I'll forward it to anybody who would like it. I'll send it to you, Claudia. I'll send it to you, Sarah. But it was basically, I was saying, hey, this has been sort of a mess of a process. Maybe there can be a middle ground where the city spends some of our DOT money and fixes up the sidewalk and plants. We've got like some bike racks that are up for grabs. We've got trees that are up for grabs. Let's put some over there. And just tell them that they can have some extra parking, more than what's required, what's allowed, but it has to be on their own land. We don't want to do a agreement where they use the land, and but we'll make the sidewalk nice for them because we've held them up this long because the process was so flawed, because the planning department had left out parts and didn't tell them months later. They're really struggling a little bit to get in the groove with the new code. And he replied very defensively. He put a picture of my house. Well, your plantings are infringing on the public right of way. Maybe
Oh,
even
boy.
your porch. My porch is not, my plantings are, but it's allowed to put plantings on the
So
sidewalk.
he countered your letter? He countered your letter by attacking you?
Yes, it was my letter. I wrote to the planning board one letter, which was a letter just talking about the waiver and my thoughts on the waiver in the background. But I also wrote to the mayor and I said, this situation, it was just directly to the mayor from me, not part of the planning process. And it was, hey, let's recognize that this process has been flawed. These people should have been finished within a month. This is a minor site plan review. This has been drawn out many months, and because they weren't guided to, I had to point out to the planning director that they even needed a waiver, and let's do something like nice, because we do want to encourage them to come here. And he doubled down. He was just like, nope, you must be against the dispensary. And that, what about down the block? There are gardens that could be sidewalk, and not even recognizing base. So I responded with things like, well, this intersection is actually in a street design standard part of this code that dictates having sidewalks. The rest are not. This is a separate intersection that actually is a gateway, and we don't need to be thinking only as sidewalks as thoroughfares, but also as public spaces. And so I replied back, but yeah,
Well,
I really like having that letter from him, because it really shows the way that you can get.
Well,
Also, you're not writing a letter to personally attack anyone, but he's coming after you personally. Citing
Yeah,
your
putting
home.
the picture of my house. I was like,
We're talking about,
he gets defensive. And the thing is,
oh,
he does it. He has all these initiatives. He's listened quite often to good advice. We've got a new form-based code. We've got many things that are amazing that other mayors wouldn't have given us, but he doesn't understand the true value of a lot of this stuff, and he doesn't use it to the full extent. And he makes too many compromises still.
yeah, I think that that's probably, my biggest issue with the mayor right now is the compromises that we just really are not in a place to be making, so to make it seem as if what Tanya was saying is petty, it's not petty. We created a zoning code that enables us to create sidewalks. We need sidewalks. Sidewalks are a huge issue in Kingston, and we do not want anything to encroach upon that. And, that needs to, even if it seems petty, it needs, all of the space needs to be taken very seriously right now. So,
An incremental change is huge.
it's huge.
It adds up.
The other thing though, that, you know, when I had a discussion with the mayor about Safe System, and he was seemed very positive about it, and I was very hopeful. You know, unfortunately, what was kind of presented back was a revision, if you will, of what Safe System is. And, you know, I'm sorry, that is not okay. You know, Safe System is a, you know, I don't know. It's a method. I mean, it is what it is. It's not like you can't say, well, you know, you can't change the rules of grammar, and you can't change the rules of what the Safe System approach is. And you also, you know, you need to state that your goal is to eliminate fatalities, period. You know, and it doesn't mean that you necessarily get penalized if you don't reach that. What it means is that you have to focus on it. You have to address that. And if you use that methodology, as Hoboken did, hopefully you get there. I mean, that's what the idea is. It's not, oh, we're going to take away all your grant funding if you don't hit 0 immediately. It's, no, we want us to move in this direction and take these, you know, proven steps that get us there. So, so when the mayor presented something that said that, well, maybe I think it was 6 years, we'll take a hard look if we should use that goal of eliminating fatalities, I just could not accept that was, you know, that's not an okay. That's the crux basically of what this is, and you know, we have to make that commitment, or else it kind of falls short.
Well, I'm glad you're not compromising, because, you know, what my understanding, just going a little back in history, the bike lanes that went in on Broadway and the Green Line, before those went in, we had the proposal to have a feasibility study. Remember, a figure of around $40,000, and I think the mayor opted not to have that feasibility study done. So then the bike lanes were put in, and then we had those fatalities, and then they said, oh, okay, now we'll do the feasibility study. And I thought, this is what happens when you postpone doing what's necessary to create a safe street and a safe bikeway for pedestrians and bicyclists. You wait till after people get killed, and then you said, oh, maybe we should look at this now. But they've already been implemented. So there you are riding along these these bike lanes, and you're not safe.
Mm-hmm.
And the city's not going to undo what they put in my understanding. So I have a problem with after the fact things. So I'm glad that Rose, you're sticking up for not compromising the safe, the safe streets model. It's a model. It's not a, I'll trade you this baseball card if you give me that baseball card, it stands as a whole.
Well, it's a system. I mean, and the safe system isn't a new idea. I mean, this actually comes from the medical industry, and it comes from the aviation industry. I mean, it's what we call a redundancy system. It's one part of your system doesn't work well. You have a driver who's speeding or not behave, or a driver who won't behave. No matter what you do, they just won't behave. Well, you create the environment where it's really difficult for them to harm somebody, even if they won't behave. To go back to, I know that, mentioning his name can bring up all sorts of mixed opinions, except in the traffic safety world. And that's Mr. Ralph Nader, who, for better or worse, you can say whatever you want about him politically, but the man saved millions of people with his work on safety belts. He just absolutely did.
Okay.
And
car design, steering
and
wheels,
car
the
design.
thing.
And what his whole thing was, you have to actually protect and expect the nut behind the wheel. What the car industry tried to make, and I could go on for a while about this really quickly. The car industry tried to say that the reason that people were dying was because you had these occasionally, I think it's great.
Yeah.
Occasionally you get like the nut behind the wheel, the person who goes too fast, and what are you gonna do about them? Like, you can't do anything about that. And what Ralph Nader said is, no, absolutely, you have to protect them and by protecting them, you protect us also. And that's basically the precursor of safe system, is that, yeah, there are people who are gonna not do what they're supposed to do. On our roads, and how do you protect everybody anyway? Because they exist. I mean, we baby proof, this is one that I always think about. We baby proof our homes scrupulously, right? Like, and if God forbid, someone's child gets into a medicine cabinet and gets into somebody's medicine, whoever was caring for that child at that time is gonna feel all sorts of heat for not expecting that child was gonna do something like that, right? And I don't necessarily disagree with that. Well, why don't we childproof our streets, for God's sake? Like, why do we just say that, oh, whenever you see a story that says like, oh, the kid darted out in front of the driveway, and it's like, yeah, that's because kids dart out, right?
Yeah.
That's what they do. So not the question, how do you, make it so kids don't dart out in their own neighborhoods and in front of their own homes, because you can't do that. What you can do is you can do something about the environment that the other parts of that environment that cause that kid to get harmed.
And the engineering adds to the education aspect, it's the immediate education. This is where you are.
Absolutely. So we have another person who joined us. So would you like to introduce yourself to everybody?
You can.
No, you can, Greg. I've talked enough.
Hi, Greg McCullough. One thing that I think is, I was at a meeting for, Public Works, which includes transportation.
Ulster County, yeah.
Yes, and I asked in that meeting if there's something we could do to, for Sauk Hill Road, to either put up a barrier or lower the speed limit.
Mm.
The next couple of days, somebody was hit.
So that was the volunteer fire. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, and that's something, we didn't open up the meeting talking about that.
Oh,
We
sorry.
lost 2 more people and then we had the volunteer fire.
So now that
Okay.
happened, I think they're gonna revisit what I asked them to do.
Yeah.
There was that makes me think of, I'm really thankful that Sarah Hanna, Shrestha, and Senator Hinchey are speaking about these topics.
Mhm.
There was a recent announcement about the ability to do studies or to,
Yeah, Matthew, do you know anything about that?
and it makes me think like, I thought like, why? The thing about the safe systems approach is you anticipate these things ahead of time. And also with Jen Metzger's announcement, when they found the person who hit the New Paltz student, talking about the speed signs and recording what speeds people go to do a speed study. And so these studies and recognizing where people have been killed, it's too often we hear that and not, this is a common sense road, somebody's going to get hit, let's make it preemptively safer. So yeah.
Yeah, well, thanks, Greg, because
Yeah.
that is, so, I mean, there is the TAP grant application right now to fix the section of Washington Avenue where John was killed. So that's right over by the hotel, and where the trail comes out. So hopefully there's gonna be, hopefully if they get the grant, there'll be some improvement over there. But that doesn't do anything about Sauk Hill. And not only there was a volunteer firefighter who was Matthew Sutton, I believe his name is, 36 years old. And I read the account of the fire chief. It was very, very passionate and very much like, these drivers are out of control.
Yeah, and it goes back to what Claudia was saying. Claudia was earlier saying that the culture in Kingston, riding her bicycle around Kingston, is so much scarier to be a vulnerable road user than her experience near Washington DC, where people seem to be more acclimated and the culture is different and pedestrians are actually respected. But yeah, like the people, the recounts of the way that the drivers were behaving around this closed section of road
Yeah.
was, yeah. and the comments at today's sheriff's office announcement for finding the driver who killed Ray, a student. There was somebody posted, when are we gonna have the electric bicyclists have to get insurance? Like, there's just this culture of like,
Right, so, like, well, I'm just gonna do a quick time check. So I thought, why don't we so Ezra, since we're talking about experiences, why don't you were talking about your experience on 9W a little bit. You could share that a little bit, and then I will wrap up the meeting talking about like some future actions that hopefully we're gonna try and get done, right? So, okay.
You want me to?
Yeah, you were telling me like about your regular commute on 9W. Why don't you?
Yeah, so, so I work at Marshall's, that's in, on Ulster Avenue. And, I live here in Kingston by the YMCA, so, I take Ulster Avenue I take to get to work. And I used to ride on the sidewalk because, intuitively, you sort of have an idea in a 4-lane road that you probably don't want to be there. And then I twice was hit by people who weren't looking while pulling out of the businesses that run along the sidewalk there. And then I started looking into it, and I learned like, okay, no, like statistically, you actually usually are safer taking the lane on a road like that. The sidewalk is designed like so. So I'm one of, I think, probably the only person I've ever seen who's not on an e-bike who takes the right-hand lane on Ulster Avenue. And it's definitely not a pleasant experience, but it is safer. I haven't really had that many close calls taking the lane. But yeah, I mean, it's a scary area to be in. Eventually when the speed limit gets up to 35, I do go over onto the sidewalk for the overpass, and there's multiple places I have to go across where there's no crosswalk at all. There's no button to hit because there isn't a crosswalk. There's no timer. Some of the buttons don't work for the places where there are, and a lot of the times on Ulster Avenue, even when you have the crossing light, people will just go right through it. I posted videos to Bike Friendly Kingston of me going in the crosswalk with the light on, and people just going right through. People who aren't even looking. It's kind of just the same story where it's an infrastructure problem, and it's a very scary kind of apathy from drivers, I think, that we see, even in the areas where there is the infrastructure. I don't know, is there anything else?
Well, and I think there's also another part of Ezra's story, which I think is just so like kind of heartbreaking, is so not only does Ezra have to deal with all of that stuff just commuting to get back and forth to work, but they've tried to actually use the Linear Park rail trail, and then we're stopped by the police because they were using the Linear Park rail trail as after dusk. Right?
Yes, that was actually, so my fiance was on.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I was there that night, but I didn't get there at
Mhm.
the same time. But yeah, so there's also that aspect with the Linear Park, the rail trail in Kingston. And I think that there's definitely also, like a lot of what you were talking about earlier, like an infrastructure element to that. With I think especially the crossings, like we were talking about yesterday. We so desperately need raised crosswalks at the places where the rail trail intersects with the streets that go towards Broadway. Just the other day, when my fiance and I were going to walk our bikes across the street, as we were walking, we almost got hit by a guy who was literally texting. I have a video. He was just texting and went through. I had a similar thing happen where, and this was weird because it was at night too, so I had like a bright light flashing on the crosswalk. As I was walking, I had to stop because a KPD vehicle just went right through. It didn't even stop. And I don't know, that's very disheartening to see, like especially when that's the people that you expect to be setting the precedent and setting an example. Yeah.
No, thanks. I mean, thank you for sharing. I mean, I know Ezra came to the traffic safety board meeting and also shared their fiance's experiences, and it's so often what you'll get from some of the more kind of angry rabbles that are out there, which by the way, I'm not even really so concerned with them. So I've decided that it's usually a pretty small but loud minority. But it is really, disheartening when you hear things like, when Ray was hit and when Starley was hit and killed, and obviously a crime was committed because those people left the scene. And what you hear in the community chat boards are just like you said, Tanya, like, oh, what are you gonna do about the e-bike drivers? And what are you gonna do about these pedestrians who walk the wrong way? And what are you gonna do about like the pedestrians wearing the dark clothing? And again, as a former traffic safety educator, okay, I'm never gonna say like, you shouldn't be protecting yourself. You absolutely should be. But a sidewalk is really great protection also. And so are streetlights, and so is 25 miles an hour, and drivers that are actually paying attention and give a crap about you.
Yeah,
And education, it brings up the education of the 3 E's again. We've been educating people to think of only drivers since the mid-century through so many ways. And now it's time to educate people who haven't had a chance to experience what it's like to be out of a car and to understand that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, it kind of goes back to like framing the question correctly. So like if you ask people like, well, would you walk to work? If you just ask them that without trying to get some context in that, no, absolutely not. But if you dig a little bit deeper and you say, well, no, I'm not going to walk because like, but the last, 15 minutes of my walk is down a dark, dangerous, scary road. Or, there's no accessible sidewalk, or there's no, or I can get the bus to work, but I can't get the bus home, like there's all of these, like, if you're not getting, so yeah, you'll get this like sense of like, oh, people just don't want it and they wouldn't do it anyway, but you're not really asking them the correct questions, I mean, for the most part, we're moving towards, being much more multimodal, and we should, for lots of reasons, for lots of really good reasons, we should be encouraging that. One of the things that I would love to see happen at some point would be like, let's actually like start giving like tax like credits for people who can demonstrate that they are not using our roads. Like, let's sit down like with their cars, right? Let's sit down and say, all right, well, it probably costs like $15,000 a year, like in maintenance, if you're using your car to commute every year, and that's probably a low estimate, actually, right? What if we gave you like $1,000 credit if you can prove that you didn't take your car 3 or 4 days a week, right?
Well-
like, wouldn't we all win in something like that?
We've got Claudia and then.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah,
Matthew.
I think Matthew had his hand up first.
yeah, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Rose. Hi, Greg. Good to see you. So I had a quick question. So besides constituent services outside in my everyday life, I am a macro social worker, a social worker that focuses on legislation and how it impacts different populations and community groups. So I have a couple of questions about the specific legislation that you mentioned about reducing, allowing municipalities to reduce to 25 miles per hour. Was there I know you stated either 50 or 55,000. It had to be over that for those municipalities to be exempt from that speed study. Is that correct?
No, so as it was written initially, towns that had a population of 55,000 and over could like do an area speed reduction, but that's very few towns. If you are an incorporated village or a city, you can do an area speed reduction. DOT initially was saying that incorporated villages and cities could do that speed reduction, but they would have to do costly speed studies in order to do that. They would still have to do what they had always done before, which was do these speed studies that are really just kind of expensive and set up to fail. With the new MUTCD, which is the new guidelines for speed laws, the need for a speed study for cities and for villages, incorporated villages, should no longer be an issue. This is, they're saying that if you go ahead and pass the ordinance and put the signs up, DOT should, you know, if they're actually using the MUTCD, which is what they're saying they're doing, which is why they said they needed to use the speed studies to begin with. But now that it's changed, they're out of compliance. So
Gotcha.
cities and villages should be able to do it. It still leaves the towns that have that population issue, which is virtually every town in upstate New York. And they would have to do road segment speed reductions. And that would require a speed study and approval from DOT. However, that also, because of the changes that the MUTCD, that should also be easier. And also the speed studies should not be as expensive as all that. And that's what we're trying to test right now, Matthew. We're trying to see if DOT will accept one of these road segment reductions.
Gotcha.
So we're not, you know, so what we do know is that Terrytown used the method where they just basically dropped their speed and changed the signs. They did not touch any of the state roads, which is the other issue, like the state roads that go through cities that's still DOT territory, you would still need a speed study. But for the roads that they had control over, they dropped the speed to 25. They didn't do any speed studies, they just put signs up, basically said, stop us, DOT. And DOT has not stopped them.
Gotcha.
And Mamaroneck did it by using a speed study. So they had enough money to have an engineer on site, and the engineer used what was called US2 limits. And so, you know, I can't get really bogged down in the details because there's a lot to it, but they used that. And what they said, which was really interesting, when I spoke to Mamaroneck, the engineer who did this, he said the really fascinating thing is they did the speed study, but they basically just keep the speed study in a drawer. DOT's never asked for it. So they did the speed study, they have it. So if DOT ever comes in and says, why'd you change your signs? They have it, but they've never asked for it, which kind of brings us back to this kind of like, is this a game of, like, I hate to use the analogy because it's like weird with a traffic safety thing, but is this a game of chicken with DOT? Okay, right? Like, are we just like, go ahead and change the signs and we dare you to stop us? You know, I don't, you know, but that's a really hard sell for, you know, cash-strapped cities and towns who, like, you know, they don't have the money and they don't have engineers on staff to do this stuff for them often. So Mamaroneck has got a lot of money and they had an engineer on staff. So that's how they did it. So Claudia, you had your hand up.
Unmute, okay. 2 points quickly, and I just want to say I'm also a social worker, Matthew, so hello from the world of social work. The point that was made, I just want to corroborate it. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, who spoke about riding on Ulster Avenue in the Linear Park.
Oh, I'm Ezra.
Ezra, thank you, Ezra. So I've also ridden on Ulster Avenue, and more power to you. What I've done, and this is not a commuting ride, it's a recreational or a shopping destination ride, but I'll find myself riding on the sidewalk, not with traffic, but against traffic, and then zigzagging along the back residential streets on the road to avoid Ulster Avenue and coming out as close as I can, you know, to my destination. But if I had to commute every day, I wouldn't be doing that. I'd be trying to get from point A to point B, and I'd be afraid for my life. I mean, I drive that road too, and I see pedestrians and I go, oh my God, I saw a woman with a stroller once in the roadway and I thought, bless this woman's heart. I slowed way down and gave her this wide, I felt like I was the vehicle, you know, human shield for her. I thought, I'm not going to go any faster than she's going until she gets onto the side. It was just terrifying. And what you brought up, the crossroads for the mid-linear park, Midtown Linear Park. I'm thinking, what about the crossroads? Because I ride for recreational purposes. I ride the Green Line down to the Rondout, and then I go along North Street and out to the Empire State Trail. That's my recreational ride. And so at those intersections where the Green Line,
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
well, every time I slow down, of course I slow down. I'm the bicycle rider, realizing nobody in the neighborhood is going to expect me to be there. And so
Yeah,
I do that automatically because I want to live. But now you're making me think, why isn't there any markings on the roadway? Why aren't there any signage saying this is a crossway for the green line for pedestrians and cyclists? So
They, on the Kingston Green Line, in the Avenues area, often you'll see that the stop signs for the trail users are obscured by branches. There are these little street stop signs, and they're hidden in the brush, yeah.
But
Our
the-
new street design. But
yeah, the onus is again on us, the vulnerable. That's what I keep
yeah,
trying to do. And
our
the
new street designs.
last thing I wanted to say was what you were touching on, Tanya, about education. I think I brought this up once before, and I was probably correctly redirected toward, structural changes that we need to make in the roadways. But my thought about educating drivers is it should be part of driver manuals and driver testing, that you cannot become a driver unless part of your education and part of what you have to show competency is understanding that as a driver, you're sharing the road with pedestrians and cyclists. You can't just think, I'm learning how to be a good driver to navigate the roads, to follow, the stop signs and the parking regulations and the turning signals. That's all about being a driver. But that's saying that the only people in the road are drivers. So I feel like driver education should be inclusive of you're driving and you're sharing the road with people who are not driving.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're not the only traffic.
Yeah, so we only have like a couple of minutes left, and I really do want to touch on, so every fourth Monday, we have the in-person meeting here and or the Zoom option. So we'll be sending out reminders. So moving forward, every fourth Monday, this is where we will be, 6 p.m. We usually start with a bike-friendly Kingston meeting, but I haven't really, this has been enough pulling this together. So hopefully by the next meeting, we'll also be able to start planning some rides too, which would be really fun. Because fun is important. But when starting on April 22nd, and is April 22nd our next meeting?
Yes, and that's
The
yes.
fourth Monday, right?
and yeah,
Yeah.
and that's also Earth Day.
Yes. So what we really want to start trying to do now that the weather is nice and we have like some ideas and direction on some asks that we want to start to do, so we really want to start doing some very clear actions. So starting with that next meeting, I'm really hoping that I can pull people together and we can start doing some really, whatever kind of action it is that you would like to highlight, whether it's taking videos of what your commute is, or doing some kind of demonstration, like how long it takes you to get somewhere on the bus, or putting in a fake sidewalk or a fake park in an area, or fixing, like I've been thinking on my street, on Down Street, like doing a project like help fix my corner, because my corner is atrocious, right? Like doing a little contest, like how could you fix my corner? And really highlighting these projects and these ideas are really important, actually, because part of the Safe Streets for All grant actually are these small scale demonstration
You
projects.
get funding for it, yeah.
You can get funding if you actually, can demonstrate that the need for your particular project. So we want to, do that. We have our YouTube channel, and I have a couple of people signed up who said they will help do with, help edit videos and stuff like that. So we would love to share lots of stuff like that. Then what we would like to do, and I would like for the elected officials here to maybe pencil this in, On May 1st, we are trying to organize a rally on the campus of SUNY New Paltz with the students and with students from Bard. To call attention, to ask the governor to help us with our situation with DOT. You know, having DOT step down a little bit on reducing our speed limits and helping to show us how to access the funds to fix our streets that we know are there. And I have spoken to Tim Rogers, the mayor of New Paltz. He definitely thinks that he would like to be available for something like that. I've also talked to some student groups on campus who seem really into it. There is an Earth Day bike clinic on the campus of SUNY New Paltz. It's not on Earth Day, it's on April 29th, if anyone would like to go and show support and get to know some of the kids there. Yeah, I'll get the information about it. I think it's actually April 30th, I think it is. Right, no, 29th. It was April 29th. They're doing it. Yeah.
Rose,
So, yeah.
and Tanya, I don't know, you seem to be reading my post about that incident on the green line. One person who responded was saying, wouldn't it be interesting to create some sort of campaign to show examples of different types of people who bike in Kingston and why they bike? And I said, that would be a great project, but who would, you know, do that? Who would put that together? That would take organization and funding and someone who,
Yeah.
you know.
That would be fantastic. I mean,
And then-
there's lots of creative people around and there's lots of stuff that we could do. And I definitely would be open to trying to, like, maybe I could open up the Ghost Bike Fund again and try and get a little bit of money together to get some paint or whatever we would have to get. I have planters I could lend to people if anyone ever wants to do a planter demonstration, but you know, the idea of these demonstrations, by the way, at least for these, is we're really not trying to aggravate towns or cities or mayors. We're actually trying to kind of get them on our side a little bit with some of these things. You know, obviously not every single political official is going to be as warm and fuzzy as, you know, the ones who are here right now. But, you know, it's for this, it would be, I think it would be a good idea to try to keep them on your good side, not piss them off too much. But then the rally in New Paltz would be, you know, that would be directed towards, you know, towards the governor, asking her to, I think in particular, the 25-mile-an-hour issue, to step in. And then that would be followed up with a march to DOT and or a ride to DOT. So the Region 8 DOT office is in Poughkeepsie. And some of the students in New Paltz have stepped forward and said that they would really love to do a ride from campus to go to DOT. And I was like, well, why don't we also do a march from the walkway? And maybe we could even, I don't know, UCAT is pretty supportive with stuff like this. I don't know about Dutchess County, but we might even be able to get bus support since it's a multimodal kind of thing. So to go to DOT to basically say, hey, look, there's a whole lot of us who want this to happen, so please do something. And then on the 4th and particularly the 7th of May, there are opportunities to go directly to Albany. On the 7th with Families for Safe Streets, I'm trying to get them to get us a bus, actually, to go right to Albany. I go pretty regularly to these lobby days in Albany, and they can be pretty powerful. And I have to say that, like, the last time I went, like, a lot of people from upstate New York showed up, and it got the assembly people's attention because they're used to a lot of people from New York City being at these things. So when they see a lot of people from a different region showing up, you know, that can get attention. Sarahana Sharisa, our assembly person, sits on the transportation committee in the assembly, and Senator Hinchey, I believe, sits on the transportation committee in the Senate. So we have 2 Ulster County representatives. So
On the transportation committee.
and Greg is on the transportation committee for the Ulster County legislative body. So we have, like, you know, we have some good opportunities, and unfortunately, we also have a lot of tragedies. We have a lot of reason to go out there and say, please help us. You know, please do something. Please let us help ourselves at least. As the federal government says we should be allowed to do. So, so that's, I guess that's it for.
Was there a
yeah.
way to sign up for?
I did, I sent it to you in the email and I will send that to everybody. So the more people who will sign up for this trip, even if you're not 100% sure if you'll go, if you sign up for it, then the more case I can make getting a bus to actually bring people, because getting to Albany kind of stinks from here. Because there's no commuter bus to Albany. So, but so does anyone have any questions? Because we're already a little bit over.
I'm a board member for Kingston Land Trust.
Mhm.
So when you brought up the stop sign obstruction, I emailed the guy who runs the group, and we do cleanups on the green line. So I mentioned that we need to check things out when as the weather gets warmer and we get out there, we need to clean up. So
Yeah, that is, Gustavo, who sits on the Complete Streets Advisory, that's a really, and this is super important issue. I mean, you're popping out of a trail and people can't see you know, and you
Especially,
can't see people.
I can't remember the name of the street right now, but the one that I was referring to specifically, it was actually the same street with the KPD officer and also the guy on his phone. It's the one where there's the that restaurant with the neon lights. It's a German.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah,
Yeah.
that street, right at the corner of where the crossing is, there's parking allowed all down the street on the street. And even though there's a small like strip of paint at the ends that's supposed to be like, you know, don't park here, it's the same thing like on Broadway, no one cares.
Yeah.
You know? So the visibility is reduced, not just, you know, from not the best lighting, a lack of raised crosswalks, so there's, you know, no incentive to slow down, but literally just because people are allowed to obstruct it completely.
Yeah.
Along the entire street.
Yeah.
We have, and so if you ever want to advocate for in the city of Kingston, and I would also, for people outside of the city of Kingston, advocate for this to develop street design standards for your municipality, but in the city of Kingston, we've got, as part of the form-based code, street design standards, and it has both raised crosswalks and also daylighting, site triangles.
Well, I know they know
Yeah.
how it works because they use it in
Right.
traffic circles, you know?
Yeah, well, that was that, yeah, but all the thing is with the city of Kingston, we get these giant projects, big grants, and incremental is still not a thing, and that's the demonstration projects we can push for by
Exactly.
implementing ourselves, these things for the street design standards.
In fact, when and we can close with this, I met with, I was in a meeting, I should say, with the principal engineer for Hoboken. And just as you're saying, Tanya, the way they're like, we don't get big money grants, we're not, you know, we don't get more money than anybody else, but what we do is we do things incrementally. So first we see that you know, he said there's this whole like methodology. We do enforcement and paint first, right?
Mhm.
And then after a couple of years, we do the curb cuts. We do the next most expensive thing. And then 5 or 6 years out, then we start really getting ambitious with but it almost never just starts with the big ambitious project. It almost always starts with these incremental things and they build up. So,
Small bets, and you can get real-time feedback on them, that's real good public engagement.
absolutely. So any more questions from anybody?
Where are all these things going to be posted? Is it on the Facebook bike friendly page? Is there an email?
No, I'm gonna really start ramping up the email more, because not everyone does, you know, Facebook, so we do have the webpage, we're still trying, it's ready to go, we just need to really like sit down and plug stuff in. But that is not a reliable source yet, I would say, so check your email and I will post stuff on social media also.
Thank you.
I can't find the sign.
Oh, was there something else?
I was just going to say, I've notified the staff about your legislative action day on May 7th and 8th, so they already.
I said, and I want to point out,
Great,
Seven-
thank you.
so did you said the dates? You said the dates?
Yeah.
And I'm realizing that when I posted in the chat, I said,
So the 7th is the legislative action day in Albany, and the 1st would be the rally on the City of New Paltz campus. And the fourth is for, New Yorkers for Transportation Equity. So that is another very, worthy group doing a lot of, they're doing more bus related stuff, but you know, it's really, I would love for these groups to actually all just meld, become one big group. Because
Yeah,
that's
so I notified the staff of those dates so that we're aware that that's happening in Albany, so that someone
And-
can.
I want to
Thank you, Matthew.
apologize. I put in the chat 7th or 8th for the Families
Yeah,
for
it's
Safe
the
Streets,
seventh.
but it's been decided now that it's the 7th.
Definitely,
So,
yeah,
sorry about that.
so,
Not 7th or
Okay,
8th.
I'll adjust.
so thank you very much, Matthew, I appreciate that. So, anything else?
Thank you,
Um,
thank
That
you, thank
sheet
you.
for those, I can't find it in my.
I
email.
will send it, I will send everything I sent to you in the email, I will send that to everybody else, so I will be sending out the sign up. To sign up for the 7th, to go to Albany on that with Families for Safe Streets. The one on the 4th, I'll send that out also, but I don't know anything about, that's a different organization, I'm just saying that we should support them. So I don't know about anything about their transportation plans to get there. If, we don't get the bus, we'll figure out how to get people there.
Carpool.
We will, we'll figure out how to get people there, so, but I think if we got, you know, a good group, we could get the bus. So,
Claudia started to say.
yeah.
I was just
Thank-
going, thank you, thank you. thank you.
Okay. All right, okay, everyone. All right, great meeting. Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience. So
Have a great
we'll
day.
get this, we'll get it streamlined eventually. So thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Thank you, guys.
Good night.
I'm gonna end the meeting, and I'm gonna figure out how the recording went.
Okay, great.
You take the, yeah, so you just got that, that's when you keep.
And I came straight in.
Awesome.
Yeah. I've never had my.